So, Doug, wow, you've asked me a few questions, and I'm feeling a little bit rinsed. My brain's like going, "Wow, where should I go now?" But I've got some questions for you. You're an incredibly inspirational person to me. You've been a mentor to me over the few years that I've known you. I say few; it's definitely more than a few years. I think it's probably about 15, if I remember rightly. But I want to know, because I never asked you this question. What or who inspired you to develop a practitioner series? You've written so many books with so many other professionals. Why the practitioner series and why now?
Right. Well, that's a really good question, Darren. And it's partly because I'm in a curious position, I'm very passionate about the integrity of what we do. So we connect with a lot of academics and we conduct a lot of research and we validate everything. So almost all of our work is incredibly well evidenced. And when we stand comparison to so many other tools and techniques, we just leave them standing. And one of the challenges we have is of getting people who are practitioners to be able to recognize that difference and to have the confidence to use our materials because they are so well evidenced, they're so well constructed, and they're based on solid science. They don't come out of thin air like a lot of fads. You get so many things appearing one year and disappearing 2 or 3 years later, or a buzzword appearing. So that's one of the motivations. But the other is, as we have got, the 20 years or 25 years since I've started work on the mental toughness concept, we learn all the time. And I have to say, we learn about mental toughness at an increasing rate these days. So as our community of practitioners and community of researchers grows, these are people who are taking this concept to applications we have never dreamt of, and they're coming back with feedback, and we're just learning so much about it. And we're learning how fundamentally important it is, how it applies to everything anyone does when it's connected to people, or where people cluster together to do something, like teams and organisations. But the other thing that comes through is a lot of the practitioners, I would say 95%, are almost specialists. They will focus on team working, or they'll focus on motivation, or they'll focus on something on the client base they'll work with. They might be working in education. And what you're trying to do really is to say, well, you're doing a great job where you're working. Do you realize that you can widen your horizon? You can actually do an even better job because you can actually do things with that context. So our challenge is to say to people, or help people to understand how mental toughness relates to the bigger picture within which they operate. And so the books are designed to do that. And we're starting with the most common applications. So we're starting with a book on coaching. We're starting with a book on organizational development and culture, one on team coaching. There's one coming out on parenting. But what we're trying to do is to help people understand how important this concept is and how it relates to what they're doing. That they understand it better and they understand the connections better. But in a practical way, you know, in our early part of the conversation, you spoke about tools and techniques. It is all about tools and techniques and understanding why they work or why they don't work. And so what we need to do is to be able to somehow educate, infuse, and using the word you've used, motivate people to think about how can I actually use this concept to do what I do even better, help my client even more, help my client to understand more, because self-awareness is a big part of our offering. And so in a sense, we're being proactive, but we're also being responsive because we get these questions from so many people. People keep sending us emails and sometimes even phoning us saying, I'm in this situation, help me, guide me. And we try to put all of this, or so 95% of it, in writing so that we can get it out to as many people as possible. So that's also a big part of the motivation. And that's sort of telling you something about my motivation. I really passionately believe in this concept of mental toughness. I'm privileged to be part of that sort of community that's creating an awareness of what mental toughness is, which goes all the way back to Plato and the Greeks. And I feel like I'm part of that journey. But we need to get it into the hands of as many people as possible, because it's the key to making a difference for as many people as possible.
I really like that as a nice summary. To make a difference for as many people as possible. What I heard you say there, Doug, which really I think stands out for me is, and what I appreciate, is this bringing together of practitioners and academics. You might want to call them pracademics.
Yeah.
Because I think far too often in much of the work that we read is so heavy in research and theory. Practitioners such as myself sometimes have difficulty understanding it and thinking, how do I apply this in the context of my work with people? But actually what I'm experiencing through this process, and I really appreciate, is that the bringing together of these great minds. You've got people who are very heavily research-based, but have also got some practical experience. And you've got those people who are very heavily practical-based and have got some knowledge around the research, but bringing them together makes it more accessible, and it actually makes it more readily available to anybody else to be able to go, okay, so there is some theory around the concept of mental toughness for individuals, for teams, for organizations. My big question has always been, what does this mean for me as a coach? How can I apply it in the context of the work with my clients? And I think this, for me, is why the series is so powerful, because those practitioners and those academics have had all their information distilled into some bite-sized, usable, practical solutions for anybody to use and experiment with.
Yeah.
So, yeah, some great points there, Doug. Thank you.
Well, I can pick up on that, because one of the things that I've learned is I've come across so many academics, and they do some fantastic work, but they do sometimes live in a university or a research department somewhere, and they churn out beautiful work, and they kind of understand how the mind works, but they don't go beyond that. And so our job is to say, well, this is how it might apply in the world that we have to live in, the practical world. We have to change, help people to perform better, to enjoy better well-being. And our job is to link the two. The curious thing about it all is that, as you know, my name appears on some research papers, and I've got kind of this split personality. A lot of practitioners think I'm an academic. So I actually get lots of emails addressed to Dr. Doug or Professor Doug. And I think, oh, well, that's interesting. Why do you think that? And I kind of begin to understand that. And of course, a lot of the academics don't see me as an academic at all. They just see me as an oik, He's just one of them. He's not as clever
definitely
as
one
me.
of them, Doug, but definitely one of them.
So I have this kind of split personality. I wear two hats, maybe three. Yeah. I don't know.
But I think we should all do that. I think that there is real value in research validating what practitioners know. And practitioners need to be able to back up their argument, why this tool might work, why this process might work. People want to know the value that this can bring. And you can go, actually, this is how it translates into the real world. And that's what we all need. And while we're talking about this whole concept of academia, and thinking about mental toughness and the broader conversation of developing mental toughness for individuals, teams, and organizations, how do you think this series supports that?
Okay, so as we have developed the mental toughness concept, especially, funny enough, in the last 5 or 6 years, when we've begun to understand that, yes, there are the 4 C's, the 4 big components, but there are 8 factors. And the breakthrough to understanding those 8 factors is very significant. We never understood the impact that would make, because what we've learned is those 8 factors are independent, which means that we all have unique profiles. And just as a mathematical exercise, there are 40,000 combinations of those 8 factors. So one of the holy grails of developing people and developing organizations is that we attend to a person or an organization's specific needs. Now, I think that the world that we operate in as practitioners, Darren, is plagued by individualization. So people are often told to, you need to go on this course because you, Darren, are this. Or you need to go through this process, Darren, because I've spotted something about you. If that process isn't adaptable and doesn't recognize that you, Darren, are unique, you're not going to get what you need out of that experience. It's one of the reasons why coaching is so powerful. And that's been reinforced in March this year, because a very, very valuable paper has come out of Oxford University, who looked at 143 resilience and wellbeing programs in British organisations, and they found that not one worked, and in fact that some did more harm than good. And the reasons for that was, touching upon what I've just said, they said that these were individualised programs, people were sent on the programs for a good reason, but they were not customised programs. In other words, they were one size fits all. And how many times in the course of my career and your career have we heard this phrase, one size fits all doesn't work? But we never really understood why. And what they then pointed out was, if you need to go on a program, you need to be self-aware about exactly why you're going on that program, what you need to get out of that program. And ideally, whoever's running the program, whether it's coaching or training, should be capable of understanding what your specific needs are. And to me, that was manna to my ears, because what is mental toughness but an understanding of your mental responses to events that impacts on your behaviors and your feelings. And so if you were to run a program according to the kind of standards Oxford University were talking about, you would start with, let's look at you a little bit more closely, Darren, and let's understand it. Let's get you to a level of understanding about your need. Now go on that program. You get what you need out of that program. And ideally, we'll tell the program organizer or the coach what Darren needs, and they adapt to meet your needs. That doesn't happen in 99% of programs. And that's what the university studied. Funny enough, it's a repetition of a study 4 years earlier that came to exactly the same conclusion. And the reason why they also suggested that there was a reason for the failure of one-size-fits-all programs, or for sending people on programs on an individual basis in that way, is, but if I say to you, Darren, I've spotted something about you, you need to improve something, I'm putting you on a course, I'm actually saying, it's your fault, Darren, not mine, nothing to do with me, but you've got the problem, I'm going to put you on a course to fix it. And that is not the healthiest way to send somebody on a program, because the reality is, Darren is responding to an environment, he's operating in a context, and I'm the person who's shaping that context. So the study also said you've got to change both the environment and the individual, or else it doesn't work. What's the point of changing the individual and sending them back into the same environment?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
so
a question
to me,
I often ask leaders is, how is your environment, how are your team a reflection of who you are and how you lead? Because team leaders used to come to me as their coach or their team coach and go, my team are underperforming. I'm really disappointed with their results. They're not living up to their full potential. My question would always be, let's start to look at this question. How is your team a reflection of who you are and how you lead? How is your team a reflection of the environment that they are in right now? Because we need to take ownership of that. So I agree with you, Doug. We need to look at both these aspects. And I'm sure you remember my research for my master's degree was focused on, does mental toughness training in the business sector have the same impact than it does in elite environments such as sport and the military? And the conclusion was absolutely. And that was a tailor-made process. But I worked with the leader of a particular team. I worked with the individuals on the team, and we tailored the program to meet the environmental factors, but also those individual needs. And there was a statistically significant change in such a very short period of time. Remembering this was conducted in COVID, when I was meant to have had a 6-month research process, down to only 8 to 10 weeks. And people reporting felt more confident, they felt their well-being was attended to, and they felt they had greater ownership of their lives. And I think it's the environmental factors, but it's also that tailored approach that really works.
So, from our perspective, mental toughness is fundamentally important. It's the oldest new concept you'll ever come across, because Plato was talking about it 2,500 years ago. Yeah. We've always known it's been important. We've never had a good idea of what it entails. And I think I'm quite proud of some of the work that I've been involved in. I can't claim that I'm the one who's done it, but I've been party to it, and we now have a better understanding of what it is. And we've got a sufficiently good understanding to put it into the hands of practitioners. And again, that comes back. That now means they can maybe make that difference.
Yeah, and I would say you've made a significant difference, Doug. Certainly from my personal perspective, but all the colleagues that I've spoken to on this journey that we've had, this series of books, is that it creates infinite possibilities in terms of our own learning. And that has a ripple effect, as you well know. And your ripple is global. So I'm grateful of that.